So here's something I've been pondering since my viewer Blue Tree commissioned me to ponder it. Hi, Blue Tree, and thanks. You ever think about how in Star Trek they can use the holodeck to create lifelike simulations of real people without their permission? That's weird, right? We talk a lot about the downside of the holodeck, how, as remarkable a piece of technology as it is, it keeps going haywire and trying to kill people. I've talked about that in videos before. Besides doing YouTube videos, I co-star on a Star Trek-themed comedy podcast called The Ensign's Log, created and produced by my best buddy Jason Harding. Jason and I have a nickname for the holodeck. We call it the Murder Box. But what about the downside of the holodeck when it's... God damn it. Computer and program. I'm sorry, folks. It's been a few years since I used my off-brand holodeck, a holographic simulator, as far as the IP lawyers are concerned. I thought since this is a video about the holodeck, it would be fun to do it in here. I was going to start out in a simulation of my room where I usually shoot these videos and then reveal that I'm actually in the holographic simulator, and it would be a neat little surprise. But I guess that's fucked. On the bright side, at least this ain't no murder box. I doubt the damn thing could keep from glitching long enough to kill me if it wanted to. I brought the chair in with me, by the way, if you're wondering why it didn't vanish with everything else when I said end program. Fool me once. Anyway, as I was trying to say a minute ago, what about the downside of the holodeck when it's working perfectly? Not that I'd know anything about that. What about the fact that, apparently, characters on Star Trek shows can just walk into the holodeck and make holographic clones of anyone they want, real or fictional, living or dead, including their current crewmates on whatever starship or space station they're on. That would never be allowed to happen in real life. And sure, realism has never been a top priority for Star Trek, but there's a really good practical reason why people would never be allowed to simulate their coworkers without permission, a reason that allows us to look at some classic Star Trek episodes in a whole new light. That reason is allowing people to make holograms of anyone they wanted for any reason they wanted without permission would be an HR nightmare. Let's start with probably the most well-known example of a member of Starfleet using the likenesses of their crewmates on the holodeck without permission, Lieutenant Barclay, in the TNG episode Hollow Pursuits. This is the episode where we meet Barclay, or Reg, as his friends call him, and actually do his friends call him that? Or more precisely, is that what he wants his friends to call him? Because we see multiple characters address him as Reg, and we never see him object, but we also never see him indicating that's what he likes to be called. What if he doesn't like Reg? What if he prefers something else? Because it's really his preference that ought to be respected. Other people shouldn't have the right to just call him whatever they want. If that were the case, I'd want to call him Bark. Might be cool, right? See him coming towards you down the corridor. What up, Bark? You walk into 10 forward and see him sitting there. Oh, hi, Bark. Some of these are just for me. Anyway, in Hollow Pursuits, Barclay spends a lot of time in the holodeck to deal with his social anxiety. He's extremely uncomfortable around other people. But on the holodeck, he can indulge in fantasies, share his thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment or embarrassment or rejection, and interact with characters who, as far as he's concerned, might as well be real people. Hell, some of them are real people, or are made in the images of real people, at least. Because this is Star Trek: The Next Generation, and the episodes were made to be broadcast in first-run syndication in the late 1980s and early 90s, Barclay's holodeck fantasies are fairly innocuous. He crafts scenarios where he wins fencing matches with Picard, LaForge, and Data, and bullies and emasculates Commander Riker, but nothing he does is all that over the top. Even his fantasies centered on women are virtually sexless. He shares a romantic Hollywood-style kiss with Counselor Troy and takes a nap in Dr. Crusher's lap. Maybe things get a little friskier off-screen, but we don't know that. And anyway, the problem fundamentally isn't how graphic Barclay's holodeck programs are, but that he's populating them with characters patterned after his co-workers. In the real world, today, that sort of thing would never be allowed, and if somehow it was, it wouldn't be after the first time it happened. What's striking about the way the situation unfolds in Hollow Pursuits is how the others react when they learn that Barclay has been recreating them on the holodeck. They exhibit a general disapproval with some embarrassment and mostly mild annoyance sprinkled in. Riker seems a little insulted that Barclay made his hologram short, and Troy doesn't think being represented as the goddess of empathy is very goddamn funny, but nobody is super pissed, and it doesn't even seem like Barclay gets in trouble. This is reinforced in the following scene, when Geordi is talking things over with Barclay in 10 Forward, and Geordi tells him that what he does on the holodeck is his own business. It's just that making holograms of coworkers is a little unusual is all. So, maybe I need to reframe the topic of this video a bit, because we, drawing upon our experiences and our assumptions, might assume that the holodeck must be an HR nightmare, but judging by what we're shown in the various Star Trek shows, it doesn't seem to be. People are able to simulate other people in the holodeck without permission. Some of them do, and nobody really seems to think it's that big of a deal. They really aren't kidding about that humanity has evolved shit, are they? Yeah, we've eliminated poverty and war and racism. Accumulating wealth is no longer a major motivating factor in people's lives. We explore the stars alongside numerous other sentient species. That's great. But seriously, nobody has a problem with people using their likeness on the holodeck without permission? Anybody who wants to can just do it? And even if someone did care, it wouldn't be a problem anyway, because apparently, going by what Geordi says to Barclay, most people don't do it, even though there's nothing to stop them? Think just for a second about how bonkers that is when we judge it by our real-world standards. This isn't Barclay's personal holodeck at his house. One would assume he can do whatever he wants in there. It's the 24th century, so the create a character tool must have so many options, it's unbelievable. This is the holodeck aboard the Enterprise, a Starfleet ship where Barclay, a member of Starfleet, works. And apparently, Barclay, or anyone else, can just walk in there and say, hey, make me a hologram of Dr. Solar who's all up on my jock, and the holodeck goes, coming right up. And before you know it, there's Dr. Solar. Actually an incredible simulation, and she is blowing your mind. It's unsettling enough to think about Barclay, a relatively junior member of the crew, doing that sort of thing. What if a more senior officer did it? What if Riker did it? Not that he'd ever need to. Know what I'm saying? Respect. What if Captain Picard did it? What if Barclay was on maintenance detail and walked into Holodeck 2 to change a bulb in one of the holo emitters or something, and accidentally walked in on Captain Picard getting his rocks off with a hologram of one of his subordinates? By our own standards, that would be more than a little inappropriate, wouldn't it? Almost as inappropriate as if the captain were actually getting his rocks off with one of his subordinates, but that's a subject for another video. And yet, I keep saying apparently, so I'll say evidently this time, evidently, there's no rule against it. Or there didn't used to be, at least. Maybe there is a rule against it now, since Barclay got caught recreating coworkers on company equipment. They didn't have a rule against it until then, because everyone was so evolved and beyond that sort of thing, they didn't think they needed a rule. It's like You know those little packets of silica gel that come in the box with a new pair of shoes or a bottle of vitamins or something? And on the front of the packet, it says, "Do not eat." And you sometimes wonder, why is it necessary to print that on there? Who would even think to eat it in the first place? Although maybe that's not fair. Maybe it's not a matter of social evolution so much as resignation. The holodecks aboard Starfleet ships appear to be pretty top of the line. That's not the case everywhere. Quark's holosuites on Deep Space Nine don't have the ability to just conjure a perfect image of anyone you say on demand. We can infer this from the episode Meridian from Deep Space Nine's third season, when this weirdo, played of course by Jeffrey Combs, the king of unpleasant yet captivating Star Trek characters, asks Quark for a holographic sex doll made in the image of Major Kira. Quark is forced to resort to all sorts of shenanigans in an ultimately failing attempt to grant that request, because just walking into the holosuite and saying, "Hey, make me a hologram of Major Kira who's all up on my jock," isn't an option. But we know it is an option in the holodecks aboard the Enterprise, and presumably other Starfleet ships and facilities as well. So what if the imaginary history of simulating real people on holodecks without permission is analogous to the real history of prohibition in the United States? When the technology first reached the simulate anyone on demand stage, the Federation Council or the United Earth or whichever government had jurisdiction tried to stop it by making it illegal and installing safeguards in holodecks to prevent it, but the safeguards were easily disabled, and whoever wanted to just ignored the law, and eventually, because it seemed like it was going to happen no matter what anyone did about it, people just got used to it. Not everyone liked it, but they figured there was nothing they could do to stop it. In time, the laws against it and the safeguard mandates were repealed, because what was the point? Then again, maybe I'm reading this situation wrong in another way. Maybe not everyone in the 24th century is okay with the kind of thing Barclay does in Hollow Pursuits. Maybe those highly evolved humans aren't so much better than us after all, the pricks. And maybe, just maybe, I shouldn't be drawing sweeping conclusions about prevailing attitudes regarding non-consensual likeness usage on the holodeck from Geordi's reaction to Barclay, because... That's right. Before we see Barclay indulging in holodeck fantasies featuring simulations of real people in Hollow Pursuits, we see Geordi falling in love with a hologram of a real person in Booby Trap, which originally aired earlier that same season, TNG's third. Now, in Geordi's defense, creating this holographic representation of Dr. Leah Brahms is not his idea. He runs a program on the holodeck that was included with Dr. Brahms' original notes on the design of the Enterprise's engine to help him solve the problem of how to maintain shields while the ship is caught in an ancient booby trap that is steadily draining its power. The computer takes it upon itself to introduce a holographic Dr. Brahms when Geordi asks the program to point something out to him. Remember the last time Geordi made a simple, if somewhat open-ended request of the holodeck, and it interpreted as a prompt to create an evil, super-intelligent, self-aware holographic Dr. Moriarty who nearly took over the ship? This is better than that, at least. Even the all-important next step in the creation of Hollow Leah isn't something we can really blame Geordi for. After she initially appears, Hollow Leah functions as a kind of interactive narrator for the program. She listens to Geordi's questions and then spits out an appropriate response from the notes written by the real Dr. Brahms. Geordi asks the computer to create a simulated personality for the hologram based on the real Dr. Brahms to make Hollow Leah easier to work with. The computer does, and in like half an hour, this happens. And look, I'm not here to judge. Geordi's lonely, as established by his shitty date with Christy Henshaw at the start of the episode, and he and Hollow Leah have just gone through a highly stressful situation together. Is it totally appropriate to make out with the holographic representation of an actual person without their knowledge or consent while you're at work? No. But at the same time, it's not like she bends him over one of those consoles and milks his prostate. It's only a kiss. But see, that's only half the story. It started out with a kiss. How did it end up like this? I've already talked about this in another video, so I don't want to get too deep into it here. The relevant bit here is Dr. Brahms' reaction. We're in the 4th season TNG episode Galaxy's Child. Dr. Brahms enters the holodeck, unknowingly replays a bit of Geordi's program from Booby Trap, sees the hologram of herself speaking suggestively to Geordi. It's the "every time you touch the ship, you're touching me" bit, and is definitely not cool with it. Her reaction is a lot more in line with what I think the reaction of many people in the real world would be. She feels like her privacy has been invaded. She feels used, cheapened, and violated. And that's when she's just inferring the really nasty stuff. Can you imagine what her reaction would be if this actually was a sex program Geordi had made using her likeness? Would Geordi even have a job? Whose decision would that be anyway? Captain Picard's? Probably, since Star Trek shows tend to depict things as being handled in-house, as it were. Forget the hypothetical sex program. What if Dr. Brahms had complained to Captain Picard about what she did see on the holodeck? In the actual episode, Geordi explains that it's not what it looks like, and Leah is skeptical at first and pissed at him for a while, but apparently she doesn't report anything she saw, and eventually she and Geordi work things out between them and part as friends. But what if Leah had gone to Captain Picard and said, "Look, Geordi says he didn't intend to create a hologram of me, and he was only using it to help him solve a crisis that threatened the ship, but when all that was over, he still went back to the holodeck and made out with the hologram of me, and I think that's gross and invasive." What would be Geordi's defense? The hologram came on to me? You know, the more I think about it, the more I start to wonder if maybe the relative underreactions of the characters to Barclay's hollow fantasies and hollow pursuits aren't a result of humanity as a whole having evolved past caring about that sort of thing, but rather a result of the Enterprise D crew being unusually chill about pretty much everything. We know that other people in the Federation are definitely not cool at all with being recreated on the holodeck to be used as fantasy playthings. We not only have the example of Dr. Brahms, but also the crew of Voyager in the episode Author from that show's 7th season, although, to be fair, in that case, there was the added factor of their likenesses being used to portray them unflatteringly in a hollow novel intended for publication. So maybe the TNG gang's relatively mild reaction to Barclay's holodeck fantasies involving them doesn't reflect on all of humanity, it just reflects on them. It fits with what we see of them throughout the rest of the series. Nothing seems to bother these people. And even when it does, it doesn't for very long. What accounts for that? I have no idea, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's because of the example that's been set for them from the top. The captain sets the tone for the ship, and Captain Picard, the man is made of stone. At least when other people are around. Gets hit by a snowball while walking down a corridor, something that should never happen aboard a starship. Brushes it off. Gets hot chocolate spilled on him in main engineering, another thing that should never happen. Whatever. He just changes into a clean uniform like it never happened. He gets abducted by the Borg and is used to kill thousands of his own people. Takes a week off. Has a fight with his brother, cries a little bit, gets drunk, and goes right back to work. He no-sells everything. In fact, if that scenario I pitched earlier, where Barclay walks into the holodeck and catches Picard in flagrante with a hologram of a crew member actually did happen, I bet he'd no-sell that too. Barclay walks in, freezes when he realizes what's happening. Picard just looks over at him as if it's no big deal, says, "Can I help you, Mr. Barclay?" No, sir. I was just leaving." "As you were, then." "Yes, sir. But is that a hologram of Commander Riker blowing your mind, or?" "Yes, Lieutenant, it is a hologram." "Right, okay. Sorry, sir, you understand why I had to ask, though. Of course. I mean, maybe all they need is a lock on that goddamn door. Shit, even I thought of that. Anyway, that's it, everybody. Thanks for watching. Exit. Exit. Computer, exit. Are you fucking kidding me?